Welcome, everybody, to another episode of PhinManiacs Live without the live. I am your host, Louis Sung, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Chad Ronnebaum. And we got a lot of stuff to talk about this week, ladies and gentlemen. And when I say a lot, I do mean a lot. In fact, I don't even know how long we're going to be able to do this show. We got Ryan Tannehill going down for the count for the season. That's probably going to take up a lot of our time because, I mean, just think about the implications. The starting quarterback of the Miami Dolphins just went down for the season. The injury bug has finally taken down the Iron Man. And then, of course, we have Matt Moore, who's going to be making his first start in 5 years. Ironically enough, that other start that he had was against the Jets. So it's kind of like a homecoming in a way. It's like, remember when you played the Jets 5 years ago? Well, you're going to do it again now. It's like, oh, joy. So that we're going to talk about that. And then Chad has a lot of stuff to talk about. He's going to unleash his rage, I guess. Chad, what does your rage sound like? I don't even think I've heard you rage before.
I wouldn't say I'm going to rage. I think I just wanted to touch on the refereeing in the Cardinals-Dolphins game. It was definitely below professional standards. That's all I would say.
I want to hear you rage one day. It's like something's going to – I'm wondering if one day something's just going to set you off.
You should have me on when the whole Martin and incognito stuff was going on. You probably would have got me there.
All right. Well, hopefully it won't take something like that to get you to unleash your inner Stephen A. Smith. Not that I necessarily want that much, but I don't think I've ever heard you angry. You're so mellow all of the time.
I try to be. I'm not during the Dolphins games. I can tell you that.
Ah, okay. So I need to put a recorder on you and hear what you sound like then.
Yeah, I'm hoping I can live long enough because these games are gonna put me in the hospital with a heart attack pretty soon.
Oh my God. All right. So we'll talk about that, but let's go ahead and get started with the first and foremost and probably most important topic of the night. Ryan Tannehill is down for the count, ladies and gentlemen. The rubber man finally just couldn't get back up. Calais Campbell, defensive end, or I'm not sure if it's an end or a tackle. I'd have to look up specifically, but he is a defensive lineman for the Arizona Cardinals. Upon review of the play, he actually pushed into Ryan Tannehill's knee by Brandon Albert. So was it a bad play? Yes. Was it a dirty play? Not necessarily. I mean, we're gonna say that, and he should have been flagged for what he did, but I don't think it was an on-purpose thing. And he did apologize almost immediately after it all happened. So I can't say for sure that it was on purpose. I would have to say no. But the fact of the matter is, Tannehill went out. Matt Moore came in, threw one. Really, I mean, depending on who you ask, it was either an amazing pass or it was an awful pass. Personally, I wasn't impressed by the dead duck he threw into the air. But, I mean, that's just me. I take higher standards in my quarterbacking than that. And Matt Moore is going to be making his first start in 5 years. So I don't know what to expect from that. Obviously, he's going to be a gunslinger. Obviously, he's going to throw the ball all over the place, and he's not going to care what or where and when something happens. He's just going to do it, and if it doesn't work, oh well, get back out there and try again. So that's a mentality that will no doubt be fun for fans to watch because, I mean, it's kind of like gambling. You have fun doing it, but you don't know if you're going to win or lose unless you have some kind of method of cheating, and we're not the Patriots, so, there's that. But it's not a torn ACL, which is a blessing in and of itself. Tannehill managed to somehow get away with not tearing up his whole knee and not necessarily needing surgery. There's no news as to the second opinion that I believe it was Armando Salguero reported he was going to get. So I assume that nothing has changed. No news is good news. So right now it's a sprained ACL and MCL. He should be able to rehab that knee, and he can just go with his let the body do its natural work, and he'll be back to form in no time. And if push comes to shove and the playoffs do happen, then there is a possibility Tannehill may return or they'll try to get him back. Although knowing what I know now about the issue and his injury, I'm not sure I would even want him out there. If we're going to get to the playoffs, which is a miracle in and of itself considering the status that we were at the beginning of the season, I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't even know if I want Ryan out there right now, because if we made it to the playoffs from the way we are now, we can definitely make it again next season when Tannehill is fully healthy and already has a year of experience. So again, we find ourselves, Chad, in a situation where are we looking towards the present or are we looking towards the future? If we do make the playoffs, are we going to trust Matt Moore to get us through those playoffs and hope that we can actually get somewhere? Or are we just going to assume that we need Tannehill if we're going to beat these playoff teams. It's a very difficult situation to be in right now, and I mean we're only looking towards next week. This actually tomorrow, as of the time of this recording, obviously. So if you're listening to this by tomorrow morning, it's going to be today or tomorrow night or tonight. I'm all over the place. Anyway, just let's get your thoughts on this, Chad. Tannehill's down, Moore is in, and of course we know that Twitter's going to have a ball if Moore does well or not. So let's get your thoughts on the whole situation.
Well, I mean, obviously, Matt Moore hasn't played a lot in recent years, and so it's going to be interesting to see how it is. And even as you mentioned, the last game he played in was the Jets, but I don't believe he actually even started that game. I believe he came in when Tannehill got hurt, and then Tannehill started the next game. So,
well, he did play that game, but I think what they're referring to was back in 2011.
Yeah, Matt Moore came in and played very well and won that game. But my point being is this will be the first time in a long time where Matt Moore is being prepped a whole, 6 days or 5 days or whatever they're putting him through to, get the reps and get him prepared to start. So this is be the first time in a long time he's actually been getting ready to start in a game. So that in itself is going to be interesting to see how he responds. I do believe the team is behind Matt Moore, and so I don't feel like their team is going to change a whole lot of what they've been doing. I don't think they're going to change their philosophy or try to adjust their offense significantly for Matt Moore. So that's kind of what I'm anticipating. I don't believe Matt Moore would have to do some real miraculous things for there to be any controversy. Matt Moore just does not have the arm that Ryan Tannehill has. And I think people will see that a little bit in the next two games. He can't throw the same routes that Tannehill can. So I don't think there's any even consideration for a controversy. What there is in play here is this is really big for Matt Moore because this is, 3 games that are on the line for the playoffs. And if Matt Moore comes in and plays well, he doesn't have to put the team on his shoulder and win games. But if he just comes in, runs the offense, and he plays efficiently, he's probably going to get an extension and he will remain the Dolphins' backup quarterback, for the next couple of years. If he comes in and he plays bad, like Matt Moore throws several interceptions or he struggles running the team, Matt Moore's time with the Dolphins will probably end, and I suspect they will go draft a quarterback to replace Matt Moore. So that's really what's on the line, for Matt Moore. In terms of the quarterback styles, Matt Moore is not near in his history. He's not near as efficient a quarterback as Ryan Tannehill, and Ryan Tannehill is much more efficient than people give him credit for. A lot of the interceptions that he has had have been more. He was maybe a little off target or a ball got tipped. It's pretty uncommon that Ryan Tannehill throws a badly judged ball into coverage that gets picked off. And a lot of people don't appreciate how good Tannehill is at that. I've watched quarterbacks where they just throw terrible passes into coverage and they get interceptions. We were watching Phillip Rivers do that, who's, a journeyman quarterback that's supposed to be very good. And so Matt Moore is going to come in and take Tannehill's place, and he absolutely will do those things. Matt Moore is a much more of a risk taker. And so you're going to see things like the way he won that game at the end there. That I would agree with you, Lewis. That was a bad pass. But Matt Moore was falling backwards, and he threw it off his back foot, and the ball floated up. And fortunately for the Dolphins, is Kenny Stills saw the ball in the air, and the defender didn't. So Kenny Stills adjusted and caught the ball when the defender ran past him. But it could be interesting because the Dolphins have some players that can play into that, especially Devontae Parker. One thing with Ryan Tannehill, I've always said, is he doesn't like to throw to guys unless they're open. And so, to me, if Devontae Parker has one-on-one coverage on the outside, he's open. And so, if Matt Moore sees that, I think you're going to probably see him put balls up in the air to see if Devontae Parker can go up and get them. What that means for defense is it's a little bit harder to prepare for the Dolphins because when Tannehill's in there, kind of what he's going to do. And when Matt Moore comes in there, he's kind of a wild card. And so from the Dolphins side, you're hoping he doesn't make some bad decisions and throw some big interceptions that cost you a game. But on the flip side, if you're a defense, I would be much more inclined to want to play my safeties back a little bit with Matt Moore because I know he's going to just take some shots, whether the guy's covered or not, whether you got a stud corner out there. on Devontae Parker. If he's one-on-one, it won't shock me at all if Matt Moore just puts it up in the air and says, "May the best man win" on the jump ball. Now that all that's going to play back into is how smart is Adam Gase and Christensen when they prepare, because if the Dolphins do happen to get in a scenario where they're up, say, 14 points in this game, I'm hoping they are ready to dial Matt Moore back and just say, "Hey, look, we got this game in hand right now. Be very careful with your passes. Don't play your normal game and take a lot of big shots, because we don't want to give them any more opportunities than we need to." Because you got to keep in mind the Jets are playing pretty close to a rookie. I know Bryce Petty's not a rookie, but he hasn't started or played very many snaps in the NFL.
He has the experience of one.
Yes, and so you gotta anticipate with Cameron Wake and those guys in there, and we've got our D-backs. Xavier Howard's returning, and so I feel pretty good about our defensive backfield in terms of their health and what we have out there. And so we want to make the Jets beat us that way. So I would hope the Dolphins are focused on stopping the run, make Bryce Petty have to throw the football a lot to try to beat you, and don't give the Jets any easy things like turnovers, interceptions, fumbles. And so that'll mean how they manage Matt Moore will be interesting, because you don't want to have him not play his game. You don't want to have him try to play exactly like Ryan Tannehill, because he doesn't have the same skill set as Ryan Tannehill. But at the same time, you want to make sure you can dial him back if you do get a lead, and you don't if you got the game pretty well won, you don't want him throwing a costly interception late in the game. So there's a lot of things in the mix there. There's a lot of interesting things going on, and I mean, all at a time where this game is enormous. I mean, this is the first time in a while, that the Dolphins have a real opportunity to make the playoffs, and I don't think they can make the playoffs if they don't win this game. I know it's possible, but it's going to be pretty difficult. They really need to go in there and win this game, because I think at Buffalo is going to be even harder than the Jets, because Rex Ryan's really on the hot seat right now to keep his job, and so I think he'll be doing everything in his power to win that game, to try to keep his job. And then you just don't know what's going to happen with the Patriots at the end of the year. You don't know if they'll even be playing their starters, or you don't know if they'll decide, hey, it's the Dolphins and they beat us the last game last year, we're not going to let them do it again. So this is a game, when you get into these teams like the Jets don't really, when it comes down to it, care that much about winning this game. They're worried about developing Bryce Petty. They're worried about what they're going to be doing next year. So players don't want to go out there and blow their knee up or things like that. And so typically when you get to these late December games and you have teams that are out of the playoffs, those teams will lay down a little bit if you can get on them early, because it's foolish for the team to get players hurt for the next season, and they want to worry more about what do they have on their team for next year. So when their personnel and game calls, that's what they're going to be looking at doing. And so what you don't want to do is let those Jets stick around. You don't want a close game going into the late into the fourth quarter, because then the Jets will turn their focus to really, really wanting to win that game. And we want the Jets worried more about next year, not worried about Sunday.
Which leads me to my next question. Here's the thing. The fact of the matter is that the playoffs, like you said, Chad, there's still a chance they could make it even if they don't win this game. But there's still a very real possibility that the Dolphins could actually make the playoffs. And just knowing that gives you this sense of there's a serious opportunity here for Miami to finally get past this godforsaken rut they've been in since 2008. And I'm actually trying to remember, when was the last time the Dolphins actually managed to sweep the Jets? And I keep going farther and farther and farther back, and I'm just not seeing it. It almost feels like they've split the games for the longest time. Actually, I just found it. The Dolphins have not swept the Jets since 2009. That's the one that was the year after Chad Pennington. So that means that Chad Henne managed to somehow manage to sweep the Jets.
Yeah,
and even then
the
it wasn't
Dolphins
close.
just haven't been that good. And the Jets had a few years in there where when Rex Ryan was coaching them, they made the championship game 2 years in a row, and they've had some better teams than the Dolphins.
So you think about that for a second, and you think there's really a possibility the Dolphins could actually get this pulled off. They could actually manage to sweep the Jets for the first time in freaking forever. Like, I mean, I don't have any other words to say it, man. It's a really big deal, and there's more on the line here than just playoff implications. There's always that whole personal pride thing about the Jets. The MetLife takeover the Dolphins NYC guys are doing. Shout out to you, Igor. You're doing an amazing job. Knock them dead, all right? And then you have, and then there's the Bills. Like, my God, Chad, if you could somehow manage to sweep the Bills too.
Well, they're gonna need to. I mean, that's what it's gonna boil down to.
That's what it's gonna boil down to. Like, because even though we have split the games against the Patriots for the past, I don't know how many have it been, 3 years. Like, we've split with the Patriots for the past 3 years, 4 years. We cannot assume and it's never smart to assume that you can beat New England. It's not ever smart to assume that, because once you think that you'll be able to pull that off, that's when they come and bite you. So, and then they step on your throat. Like, I watched the game against the Ravens on Thursday night, at least the very end of it. All the Patriots had to do was kneel, and the game was over. But instead of doing that, they decided to hand the ball off again and say, you know what, let's just try to score one more time, because really, who cares? It's like, you literally had one job. All you had to do was kneel, and the game was over. But no, he wanted to run the ball. That's the Patriots mentality. That is, we're going to run it down your throat. We're going to step on your throat, and then we're going to rip your heart out of your chest while it's still beating. That's the New England way of doing things, and that's why they are so dangerous, because they don't care, and they're gonna find a way. They just claimed Michael Floyd off of waivers, and everybody's defending the move because it's New England. Any other team does that in the midst of the whole DUI thing, and they're probably going to get a whole lot of criticism for it, because, oh my God, the Cardinals just cut this guy because he did something awful, and they're trying to make a statement, and now this team is picking him up because, hey, he's a good player and stuff like that. A lot of people would probably compare that to Greg Hardy. Not that it's a fair comparison, because, I mean, DUI versus domestic violence, I mean, there's no comparison, but people are going to make that comparison anyway. But since it's New England, they get away with it. like, if I'm being perfectly honest, not that they ever would, because I don't think even New England would go that far, but if the Patriots decided they wanted to sign Greg Hardy, if there was any team who could get away with it, it'd probably be them. So that's the New England way of doing things. They don't care what you think. They're going to do their thing, and they're going to make you like it. So as soon as you think that as soon as you think that you can let your guard down for even a second to even assume that you're going to be able to beat them, the moment you bet against them, that's when they will bite you. So if the Dolphins don't sweep the Jets and the Bills, there's a very real possibility that they won't make the playoffs, and all this conversation really is for naught, because you have a situation where all you have to do is win 2 games. Jets, Bills, and New England probably beats you because they're New England, and you always have to assume that. But even if you do beat New England, that would be icing on the cake. But you would still like to be able to see them beat the Jets and the Bills, because you would just like to see them get swept for once. You would like to see that the struggles against the AFC East rivals are starting to become more doable, because every time we've run into the rivals, we think to ourselves, well, we can get past these guys. They're not that impressive. And then the Dolphins go out there and lay an egg. You and I went and watched the Buffalo game last year at the stadium. And we thought to ourselves, yeah, well, when you and I are in the same stadium, Chad, they always find a way to win. We're like 2-0 whenever we're watching the game together. And then they go ahead and do that. It was not a pretty picture, and I was miserable the whole time. The AFC East has been an issue for the Dolphins for a very long time. And it's usually the AFC East that ruins any playoff hopes we have come near the end of the season. It looks like that's starting to change, and you would like to see them win despite all the issues, just to prove that in the future, which is where I've been trying to focus this whole time, you can think to yourself with confidence, okay, this team is on its way to becoming a playoff team, because they managed to get to the playoffs and beat their rivals and get the job done when the chips were down. And not every year is going to have Ryan Tannehill injured. Not every year you're going to lose Rashad Jones for the season. Not every year you're going to lose Pouncey forever and ever, and then the offensive line crumbles. I mean, no one has that kind of a bad luck except maybe the Cleveland Browns, but I digress. I'm just trying to keep myself focused on the now, like the actual right now, like this upcoming game, because it's the MetLife takeover game, and that's a big deal. But also for next season, I don't want to get too far into the whole Dolphins are going to make the playoffs, because you have to make Denver lose 2 games still, and they'll probably lose to New England because everybody loses to New England, and they might lose one more because I don't trust Trevor Siemian as far as I could throw him, and the defense has seemingly taken a step back this year. So with that in mind, I mean, I would love a playoff run, but that's not what I'm looking at. I'm just trying to figure out, what can Matt Moore do right now for the Dolphins? Can he prove that he's still a viable backup? That's what I'm looking at. Because I'm sure Twitter was going to say stuff like, oh, well, Matt Moore's better. See, we told you so. We told you so. I was like, please shut up now. I've had people tweeting at me that Ryan Tannehill is still awful, even when even during the 6-game winning streak, people told me that Ryan Tannehill was awful. And as soon as he crashed and burned against the Ravens, those same people came back at me because, see, we told you it was going to happen. It's like, good grief, one bad game. And then he came back and did what he did against the Cardinals, and then he wound up getting knocked out. And there were still people like, this is what actively angered me, Chad. And this is me going into ranting and raving mode, because right now I just need to get this off my chest now that I brought it up. There were people who dared make the implication that this was a good thing. And these people went out of their way to say, well, now that Tannehill's hurt, we'll get to see what Matt Moore can do. It's like, are you kidding me? This man might have torn his ACL. We know now he didn't. But this man might have torn his ACL. And y'all are celebrating. For real? For real. Like, it's not even the AFC East rival. It's not even like it's Tom Brady who went down and then, oh, it's kind of hard for division rivals to have sympathy for the other players. But this is your own quarterback. I have never seen that before. I have never seen someone hate a quarterback so much. I have never seen a fandom hate a quarterback so much that they are happy to see this man go down, that they are happy that this guy might have torn his ACL. And what's worse is that they were upset that there was still the possibility that Tannehill might be okay. I mean, what kind of a fan base is that? Like, I don't want to call out all of Dolphins fandom, because there's a lot of really good fans out there, like Igor from Dolphins NYC. They're awesome. And there are a lot of awesome Dolphins fans out there. But there are just some people out there, and I don't know if they're in every fandom. I'm sure they all have some choice few, but I've never seen them so vocal all the time. You actually had the audacity to be happy that Tannehill got hurt. And not just that he got hurt and he's going to miss a few games. No, you are happy that the possibility that his knee got torn up and he may never be the same. You're happy about this. Like, do you have any human sympathy at all? If it had been Jay Ajayi, you wouldn't have been happy. If it had been Landry, you wouldn't have been happy. I'm sure nobody was happy when Rashad Jones went out. But for Tannehill, it all changes.
I think there is not as many people as you think that are or personally against him, like wanting him to be hurt, like on a personal level. Like, I think you're always going to have a contingent of fans that have put themselves where they want to be right, and they felt Tannehill's bad, and I'm not going to go into depth, but a lot of that has been perpetuated by some of the beat writers who don't like Tannehill, and so they're trying to get fans in that line of thinking. But again, the reality is Tannehill he's had a pretty good year overall.
One of his best years personally, just performance-wise.
Yeah, and what I touched on earlier is people forget that he doesn't make a lot of really bad decisions and mistakes with the football. And people got spoiled. There's a big chunk of this fan base that got spoiled because they got used to having Dan Marino. And Dan Marino could do things that a lot of quarterbacks just weren't able to do, and he was here for so long. You got used to having a star quarterback. And so there's just going to be this group of the fan base that they're not going to be happy if you don't have Tom Brady or Peyton Manning on your team, Aaron Rodgers, guys like that. They want one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And I agree with you. I want one too. But what these people forget about, which surprises me, is what it's like to have a bad quarterback. There's a big difference between having a good quarterback and a bad quarterback. I know there's also a difference between having a star quarterback versus a good quarterback, but you can win with a good quarterback, and that's what the Dolphins are doing. And a lot of teams have won Super Bowls with good quarterbacks. They didn't have to have the top quarterback in the league to do it. And so, to me, it was a bad thing. And I know some of the fan base thought that, but I think the majority of them didn't.
I don't know.
But with that being said, it is what it is. It's Matt Moore's time to step in. I think nobody judges the respect and what a player is more than the other players. And I don't know. To me, it was almost moving to see the guys coming over, seeing Mike Pouncey, seeing Kenny Still, seeing Jarvis Landry, seeing the other leaders of the team. That Brandon Albert and Mike Pouncey are both heavily respected guys around the league. They're professional players that take care of business, and those are two of the guys that came over, to talk to Ryan Tannehill, because obviously you could tell Ryan Tannehill had been told in the locker room that they believed it was a torn ACL. They were going to have to do some scans to confirm it, but that's what they believed it was. And so when he was out there on the sideline, he believed his season was done. Now, I've seen quarterbacks that won't come out in that scenario. They would have just stayed in the locker room. And he was out there, with his team, doing whatever he could on the sideline to help him out. And so, to me, it more than anything told me what kind of a person Ryan Tannehill is and how competitive he is and how much he's been putting into it. So I feel good that he's our quarterback. I have no problem bringing other quarterbacks in, but I'm just kind of over the talk. Well, let's get rid of Tannehill without any other viable options. And, there aren't viable. Jay Cutler is not a viable option to replace Ryan Tannehill. Matt Moore is not a viable option to replace Ryan Tannehill. So to me, you keep Ryan Tannehill. He just is getting better every game. I think he's gotten better over his career. And you know what? You want to draft a quarterback? Great. And if you somehow hit on a Dan Marino in the draft somewhere, great. But until you can do that, you keep Ryan Tannehill as your quarterback, and I don't see any other thing that makes plausible sense.
Do you think that if push comes to shove, Matt Moore could get the Dolphins through or even to the playoffs?
Oh, absolutely. To me, it's important because we have to see what Matt Moore has to play at a decent level. He doesn't have to come in and put this team on his shoulder, but Matt Moore can't come in and struggle throwing the football, because then defenses will change what they do. And so because Matt Moore's played several games, he's been around the league, I don't think a team's going to come in there and say, well, let's just blitz him like crazy. I would be more afraid to blitz Matt Moore than I would Ryan Tannehill, because that's right up Matt Moore's alley, because he likes to take big shots down the field. The right way to defend Matt Moore is you want to have him make a mistake. So keep your guys back in coverage and try to see if you can get him to throw a few errant passes into coverage and pick them off. And then you can, really put the Dolphins in a hole. So that alone makes it interesting. I feel okay with Matt Moore. He's fine. He just has to be able to make some throws, and so that's what I'm going to be looking for in these games is what kind of velocity is on his ball. Is his arm okay? And if he's making decent throws with the football, he can make throws that force the team to have to play the whole field and show he can still throw a lot of these NFL caliber routes. Then we'll be fine. And so I'm not too worried about it. He is what he is, and I don't think Adam Gase is going to put Matt Moore in a position where he's going to come out, spread everybody out, and just start throwing the football like crazy. I would expect Adam Gase is going to continue to do what actually was helping Ryan Tannehill. He's going to be running these two tight end sets. We've got Deion Sims back now, which really helps us with the personnel to do that. Our lines is healthier than it's been in a few weeks. I know Pouncey's gone, but we got Brandon Albert, in there, and we got Tunsil in there again. And so I feel like we're going to be able to get some push, and so that we can start to use Jay Ajayi. I don't think Adam Gase will put Matt Moore in a position where he's going to ask too much of him. And as long as Matt Moore can execute the offense, it will be fine. What I'm much more worried about is if Matt Moore gets hurt. Then we're probably not going to be able to make the playoffs if Matt Moore goes down. I know they've got TJ Yates, who they've brought in this week, but there's no way you could expect a guy like that to do much of anything. You'd have to run a very limited playbook with him. So,
and that's another thing that I wanted to bring up. The whole signing of TJ Yates. I mean, I understand that they want a veteran guy in there, but if you lose more, like, let's be realistic about this. If you lose more, you have essentially conceded the season because you can't win with a third string just run. Well, maybe you could if you're Adam Gase. I don't know. Maybe how much of a miracle worker is he? I guess we'll find out if push comes to shove. But under conventional logic, if you lose your backup quarterback and you're relying on a dude you just signed a week ago, you're not going to make the playoffs. In fact, you may not even score points because you need
I don't know,
somebody.
Lewis. I kind of had a problem with it too. I looked at it and I thought, wait a minute. Okay, so I understood that we were going to get a quarterback because I knew that Tannehill wasn't going to. Most likely, Tannehill won't play the rest of this regular season, and so we'd have to be into the playoffs for him to probably be able to even consider coming back. And so I knew we had to sign a quarterback because you have to be ready in case Matt Moore gets hurt. Then who's going to come in then, and who's going to back them up, and so you had to get somebody ready. What I was surprised in is that they immediately brought Yates in and didn't even give Dowdy a chance to come and be the backup quarterback.
And that was my point.
And that makes me wonder. I'm like, why is Dowdy on our team then? Is because I mean, if he's been on our team the whole year running practice squad. I don't know, he's not on the active roster, I don't believe, right, Lewis? But he's been on our practice squad.
Yes, he is on the practice squad, and he didn't look bad in the preseason. He looked pretty good, and he found completions all over the field. So I don't see what the problem is.
But what that means is he's been in this offense all season. So I
That's
mean,
the other thing.
He isn't dressing, but he's been in every practice playing. And so what that came to me, I'm like, what is he even on the team for? Why are you giving a roster spot to Dowdy? Because what is going to change next year that he hasn't picked up in almost a full year of being with the team, that we've decided to bring a backup in his place? And so if Dowdy isn't the guy and they don't feel comfortable, I'm fine with that. But I don't understand what he's doing on the football team then. Why wouldn't have Dowdy been cut and Yates signed immediately when he was available, if that's how they feel? And so that to me was just a little bit odd. Does that mean that they just like Dowdy, and so since they didn't need him, they didn't need a third quarterback, they were just letting him have the job?
He's the new teacher's pet. He's Pat Devlin for Adam Gase.
That's what it comes off like, because that's what I was thinking. I'm like, wait a minute, if Dowdy isn't able to be the third quarterback, you never believed he was the third quarterback, then this isn't like you get to be nice to people. If Dowdy is not your third quarterback, he needed to be cut, and they needed to have their third quarterback in here, because now they're trying to force feed TJ Yates the offense just in case. Because you know what, Matt Moore could get hurt in the first play of this game, and then our whole playoff run depends on TJ Yates. And so I'm just being critical of why wouldn't TJ Yates been in here weeks ago to try to get him ready? I guess maybe just he's not eligible to be on the practice squad or something like that, but I don't know. It seems odd to me that Dowdy's not the third quarterback, having been on the team for the whole year. But anyway, it is what it is. Hopefully we won't have to worry about that, and Matt Moore will be able to hold up in there. These games, despite the quarterback, especially the Jets and the Patriots, are going to be about how bad do the Dolphins want it, and can they execute? Because I'm telling you right now, I know it's a rival game and it's going to be tough, but the Jets are not going into this football game with their primary focus to be beating the Dolphins. And that's something the Dolphins have to understand. You just have to get after them. Because the Jets, they are much more worried about trying to judge if Bryce Petty's their quarterback of the future. They're trying to figure out what players on their team are their players for the future for next year. It's not even in the best interest of their football team to win this game because they get better draft picks. I'm not saying they're going to come in and try to lose, but the Jets, again, their number one priority isn't even to win this football game. They want to probably execute. They're probably going to be running plays in this game that aren't even plays designed to game plan against the Dolphins. They're going to be plays used to judge players on their team. So they might have said, hey, let's come out and have Bryce Petty run the no-huddle offense here because I just want to see how he does, because we're trying to judge if we need to get another quarterback next year. And so the Dolphins need to take advantage of that. The only team left on the schedule that is going to really try hard to beat the Dolphins is the Bills, because Rex Ryan's fighting for his job.
And Rex has like this issue with the Dolphins.
Well, no, he's fighting for his job, and that's usually the case with Rex Ryan, because he's one of these guys that it's rare he's not at least close to 500, and so he's not going to be in there trying to judge his players. He's going to be playing his absolute best players and trying to beat the Dolphins to give an argument for him not to get fired. But the Patriots, and it'll just depend on how the season plays out. But if the Patriots are coming into that last game with the number 1 seed locked up, they'll put a game plan together and they'll try to beat the Dolphins, with some of their backup players. But even Bill Belichick, who will do crazy things, is not going to play Tom Brady that much at the end of the year in a meaningless game when you got somebody like Ndamukong Suh on the other side. I mean, talk about a night. The Patriots are worried about winning the Super Bowl right now, and the Dolphins are just trying to make the playoffs. There's a difference between them, and I don't see the Patriots even trying hard at all in the final game if they've got that number 1 seed locked up, and they'd be foolish to do so. I mean, could you imagine playing Tom Brady in that game, and Ndamukong Suh getting a hold of him, slamming him into the ground, and putting him out for the rest of the year? I mean, that would destroy the Patriots' chances to win the Super Bowl. So if I were a New England fan and I had the number 1 seed locked up, I wouldn't even want to see Tom Brady in the football game. I would be like, no, you just leave him comfortably on the bench and we'll worry about him in the playoffs. Or maybe let him play a series or two like a preseason game, but you don't let Tom Brady play a meaningless game the end of the year if you are the number 1 seed in the playoffs. So, I mean, what that boils down to, Lewis, is the Dolphins, 2 of the 3 teams they're playing, their priorities aren't even going to be to win the football game. And so, I'm not saying they're going to attempt to lose the games. I'm just saying that their number 1 priority isn't even to win the football game. They've got other things that they're worried about. The Patriots would most likely are going to be worried about trying to be as healthy as possible for the playoffs, and the Jets are going to be worried about getting the most out of the games at the end of the year to help their chances to win next year. And the Dolphins need to take advantage of that. And this feels so similar to the way it was a couple years ago when Miami just had to win 1 game against the Jets or the Bills to make the playoffs.
And they would have done it.
And they lost them both. And so this is really a defining moment where is this just another new coach who's just got an average team again? Is this Joe Philbin 2.0 and the Dolphins are just going to lay down the next 2 games and lose them, or is this a team that's going to come out and be ready to fight to the death? Because if they're come out that way, I'm telling you, the Jets and Patriots do not want to get in a dogfight game where people are getting hurt and it's extremely physical and it's extremely challenged, because that's not what those teams are even trying to do. And so that's what this is about. Can Adam Gase get his team in a frame of mind where they've got to go out there like it is a playoff game? And I honestly, if the Dolphins go 10-6 and they don't make the playoffs, or if they do go to 10-6 and they make the playoffs and win a game or lose a game in the playoffs, this is going to be a very successful year for Adam Gase. If Miami lays down and loses, say, 2 out of the next 3, then we're going to go into the offseason, and that's going to be a narrative that we're going to have to deal with is, yeah, did Adam Gase really do anything different than Joe Philbin? Are they really any better? And, a lot of people will be saying, oh, yeah, they're way better. But when you come down to records, that would be a very typical Joe Philbin end of the season to get to 8-5, then lose 2 out of your last 3 and not make the playoffs. So that's what this is about. And I don't think the injuries are justified that you can use it as an excuse. I mean, the Patriots don't have Rob Gronkowski right now. They didn't have Tom Brady at the beginning of the year, yet here they are, the best team in the AFC right now. They seem to overcome the injuries just fine. You've noticed that you can probably take 3 starters out of the Patriots' offensive line, but they always seem to have the Great Wall of Foxborough protecting Brady, don't they? It just always seems to hold up. And so Miami has to get away from this, oh, we've lost Rashad Jones and we've lost Mike Pouncey. Well, I guess it's over. We don't have a chance. They've got a game plan. They've got to come in and they've got to fight for a playoff spot because they're right in it. And they've got some matchups that favor them. So that's what this is all about. And so the Jets are going to be, the first team up. And I think Matt Moore will play fine. And the real question is going to be, is the team from a prepared? Are they prepared for the game and they are emotionally at intensity level to come out and just play to the end, 60 minutes of everything you got?
Well, I feel like they've already proven that they're more resilient than Philbin's Dolphins. I mean, Philbin's Dolphins wouldn't have won half these games that year. I mean, and you can tell in the development of the players, the overall attitude of the franchise. Even if they go, there's no way that they can be. I take it back. There's still a chance it could be 8-8 because if they lose all 3 games, it'll be 8-8. But I can't see them losing all 3. And even if they do, just the difference in the franchise is palpable. And let's not forget that Philbin had. Honestly, I would say I would venture to say that Philbin had more talent on his rosters than Miami has now. And just
I
that,
think that's a fair statement, Lewis. I think that Adam Gase has shown a much greater ability to adjust his game planning based on what he has versus Joe Philbin. And if you would have given Adam Gase maybe a Philbin team from 2 or 3 years ago, Miami probably would have done better than under Gase than Philbin. But obviously, that's nothing but speculation. But I would agree with that. I'd be on board with that.
yeah, that's the only point I'll make about how Gase has already had a successful year, just because it looks like there's progress being made. Philbin, I mean, there was some individual progress from specific players in his years, but very few far in between, and it always just felt so dead inside. Like
No, I mean,
even when they won.
I'm just saying the narrative. I personally think Adam Gase has done much better. I mean, he clearly took control of the football team. Joe Philbin would have never left Jay Ajayi at home on the opening game. He would have never benched Byron Maxwell. He would have never benched Mario Williams. He would have just let those guys play, kept playing the system, and just died a slow death. That was what Joe Philbin would have. But Gase didn't do that. He came in and took control of the team. So I like what he's doing. But I'm just saying, when it gets to the end of the day, that's all people care about is what was your record? How did the season end out? And if Miami doesn't win 2 of the last 3 games, I think most people will consider the team just another normal Dolphins team that does okay, but they're not a playoff caliber football team. And so that if they go 2-3, they'll even if they don't make the playoffs, I think they'll shake that. I think if Miami finishes this season 10-6 with what Adam Gase was given when he started this season, that's pretty good. I'd feel really good about it.
Yeah, and that's what we're gonna have to actually look forward to. Now, let's stop. Let's not look too far into the distance. Now, let's look up to this upcoming game, and it's gonna come down to officiating a lot of the time. I know that Brandon Marshall is very much looking forward to facing off against Byron Maxwell again, and by that I mean not at all. I mean Marshall hates Maxwell's guts, and Maxwell's just kind of letting the barbs wash off of him like water off a duck's back. He's like he doesn't care what Marshall has to say. He's like doing his job. But Marshall has stated that Maxwell holds on every single play. And he is apparently going to bring his own little yellow penalty flag that he will throw should the referees miss something. And he will make sure to let the refs know, hey, he held me just now. You missed me. I don't know if he'll actually do that. If he does, then we're going to have problems. But the fact of the matter is that penalties have been a serious issue for the Dolphins for the past few weeks, and don't know why. Maybe there's a conspiracy. We always think there's a conspiracy against Miami, but I know that you wanted to go off a little bit about that and unleash your not rage on me, Chad. Let us know what you think about the officiating.
Well, I honestly am not going off the direction that I feel there has been officials targeting Miami specifically. And so Miami, I knew going into this year, Miami was going to get penalized a little more. One is because they have a new coach. Two is they're young. And three, on defense, they play a lot more man-to-man tight press coverage. And so that with that territory, you get more holding calls, you get more pass interference calls. And I could care less what Brandon Marshall thinks. Brandon Marshall, in reality, he's been a talented player, but he has been irrelevant for his whole time in the league. He's never done anything spectacular other than run his mouth. And so, of course, he's saying that because he knows that Brandon Marshall is not a fast wide receiver. He's a big wide receiver. And so when you play press coverage on Brandon Marshall, it's really hard for him to get open because he can't just say, oh, I'm just going to run straight down the field and blow by you with my speed. He's not fast enough to do it. And so he hates the way the Dolphins play defense and the way Byron Maxwell, because he has trouble getting open off those guys in that type of coverage. So, of course, he's politicking it every way possible because he wants more penalty flags thrown on the Dolphins. I get all that. And my point on the refs was specifically for the Dolphins-Cardinals game. And I realized the Dolphins won the game, but I was frustrated because it literally, Lewis, I've watched a lot of football games. It was the worst job of refereeing I've ever seen in a professional football game. And I was just taken back at what the NFL is even thinking by allowing those officials to still even continue to be in the NFL. And you think about what has the NFL been promoting the last few years? Well, their number one concern has been player safety. And there were 3 times in this game the officials made calls that go against player safety. Obviously, the low hits that on the quarterbacks, those have been instilled specifically. If you want the conspiracy, it was to protect Tom Brady because that's how he had his season ended, was with a hit real similar to what Ryan Tannehill took. And so the NFL has realized that, hey, you know what one of our most valuable commodity is are these quarterbacks. We need our star quarterbacks playing because more people go to the games, more people watch the games when we have the star quarterbacks playing. So we want to protect them from injury every way possible. So that rule is in there. So that's exactly what happened is Ryan Tannehill gets hit low. I understand that he was being blocked into a little bit, but to me, that's a call the refs make to enforce low hits on the quarterback's knees. And they disregarded it in Ryan Tannehill. And he's probably done for the year because of the hit. Another one was Jay Ajayi got face masked and they didn't call it. That's another player safety issue. When a player gets grabbed by the face mask, that's a no-brainer call. You've got to call. And the other one was the fumble. In the NFL, when you have on film a guy that's clearly recovering a football, you want to make sure you give him that because you don't want to promote people getting hurt in the pile. I mean, what goes on in there is insane. And by not giving that ball back to the Dolphins, when you could see on camera, Jay Ajayi clearly jumped on it and it got taken away from him in the pile. That's telling me as a football player that anytime there's a fumble loose, pile in there and do everything in your power to hurt the guy underneath you to get the ball away from him, which again goes against player safety. So in my mind, there were 3 calls that went against player safety. On top of that, they made horrible calls on both sides. The Dolphins got called twice on holding calls that were not even holding. One of them was so ridiculous on Juwan James, I didn't even know what to think because he was literally driving the guy forward and they called holding on him. And it wasn't just the Dolphins. They called pass interference on the Cardinals when it wasn't even close. There was no pass interference there. And so I understand refs are human. And I understand you can miss a call here and there. I understand that. But when you're throwing flags and making calls on penalties that didn't even happen, you're missing them that bad. That's a horrible way to affect the game. That's not what people are there to see. And so I actually looked this guy up at the game because I was just so taken back because I'm like, oh, this guy's going to have to get disciplined or something with this crew because the game was called so poorly. And again, just their uncertainty throughout the game. There was one time when Ndamukong Suh had encroachment. He jumped off sides and ran into the lineman, and they had to have like a 2 or 3 minute meeting with each other to even call that penalty. And so everything was screaming incompetence. The commentators watching the game called some of their calls ridiculous. And so to me, that it's getting to the point where it should be embarrassing to the NFL to have a crew out there. And so the name of the head official of that crew is Jerome Boger. And so I looked him up, and if anybody feels compelled, go to Google and look this guy up. And there's been articles put out by ESPN. I'm not talking about some beat writer for the Dolphins. This is ESPN saying this guy's flag happy crew to call the Eagles-Cowboys game in Week 8. This guy has called twice as many pass interference calls as anybody else in the league. He's way higher on holding calls. And so my question for the league is, when you watch a football game, you shouldn't be game planning based on the refs. And that was what this article was suggesting for the Cowboys to say, oh, Jerome Boger's crew is covering the game. You want to throw a lot more passes up to Des Bryant because you're much more likely to get a pass interference call with this referee. That to me, then you're actually game planning for a referee's crew because they call the game differently than the other refs. That is the last thing in the world you want as a league, is having referees that aren't consistent and referees that are making incorrect calls. And so I went through the game, and so I looked at it, and they had several calls that should have never even been calls that weren't penalties. They had calls I disagreed with. I understand calls aren't going to go my way, but the Kenny Stills, where they called an interception, they clearly both had a hold of the ball at the same time. And the common rule is the tie goes to the wide receiver, but the refs called it the other way, and they just said, we don't have enough evidence to overturn the call. And so it was call after call after call that just screamed incompetence. And I just found out the crew has a history of incompetence. They've called other fumble recoveries wrong. I've seen looking up the history of them. And so my question in general is, this is not something I normally do, but why in the world is Jerome Bogers or Bogger, however he says his name, why in the world is the NFL allowing a crew in there to call games like that when they clearly are the worst NFL crew in the NFL? I just hope the Dolphins don't get him again, and I would really, really be surprised if the NFL would even allow that crew to officiate a game when the playoffs get here. They need to be removed. That's my honest opinion, and that has nothing to do with the Dolphins, and it has to do with consistent referees in the NFL letting the players decide outcomes of games and not being involved in letting the referees decide the outcomes of games.
Well, unfortunately, Chad, I mean, now we're kind of going into a little more detail than just Dolphins talk. Now it's just literally everything about the NFL now, because well, let's be honest, it's not just, I mean, you brought up all these stats about Jerome Boger and he's like the worst guy, but let's be honest, refereeing across the league has been pretty darn awful. I mean, somebody will make this argument that, well, actually this is the worst officiating crew in football, and you brought up the twice as many, so I guess Boger actually is objectively the worst one. But there's just been so many bad officiating crews, and I don't understand the whole these guys are part-time refs, because I've seen this guy Boger for the past however many years. How many years has this guy been around in the NFL? It almost feels like he's been around forever. And and these guys are supposedly part-time referees. Like, these guys aren't full-time refs. Like, so how long do you get to work as a part-time referee? I don't understand how that works.
That's completely and there's been a few things with the NFL. Again, I know we're leaving the Dolphins talk, but the whole Patriots thing with the deflated football to me was absolutely ridiculous, because I saw that and I'm like, why in the world does a league the size of the NFL makes billions, Lewis, billions of dollars every year in this sport, and they can't afford to pay somebody to control the footballs? I mean, literally, there should be one guy assigned from the league that's not affiliated with either team who controls the footballs all game. Why in the world would you let the teams control their own football?
Because some quarterbacks like football a little more, a little less. I know Brady literally actually does like his footballs a little less inflated
I
than usual,
understand
but
that,
not that much.
but why do you even allow a team to do it? And so the other thing is the refs, Lewis. I've heard that before, where it's like, well, look, hey, these refs, this is just their part-time job, and I'm looking at them like, this is the NFL. If they're NFL referees, you're telling me the NFL does not pay a referee enough to ref a football game? One is that makes
And these guys have been part-timers for a very long time.
well, it makes me concerned. One is because then I'm thinking, well, that makes them even more susceptible to somebody wanting to pay them to make certain calls. Now, I'm not saying that's happening, but if these guys don't even make enough money to be able to do it full time, you know what I'm saying? If this guy's making 30,000 a year and try to feed his family, and somebody comes to him and offers him a big sum of money to make certain calls, the whole thing, it just doesn't make sense. The refs should be well paid, and this should be their profession, and they should be the absolute best at what they do. And so, to me, it's almost a travesty that the NFL is neglecting it that much. I guess the referee position. So, anyway, that's a kind of a side topic, but I was just shocked at how badly the Cardinals Dolphins game was called, because it neglected player safety on the majority of their calls, and I can tolerate referees that miss calls. If there's pass interference, and even if it goes against the Dolphins and the defender pass interferes with the guy and we don't make the catch, it's frustrating, of course, but I can understand that. What I don't like are referees that are throwing flags and making calls on really tic-tac or penalties that aren't there, because now the refs are the ones that are dictating the game, and that's not what people are there to see. They're not there to see a really suspect holding call on a guy neglect to play. You don't want to see that as a fan. You want to see the players play the game, and you don't want to even realize the refs are hardly there. And so if the refs, one, aren't consistent, and two, if they're making really aggressive calls that they don't need to throw the flags on, that's when I really get frustrated with the refereeing.
Well, I don't know, man. I guess that just gives more arguments for everybody who's like really tired of rich people. I don't know, but
Well, and like I said, Lewis, I'm not even taking this from the angle as, well, the Dolphins lost the game because of the referee, and the Dolphins won the game. And I wanted to take the time to talk about that was just a ridiculous display of refereeing, and that should not happen in a league like the professional NFL. That they should have professional refs that can do a better job than that. And so I don't know what the reasoning was, if they just had a bad flight or something like that. But when I looked up that I want to say this is by week 8, this guy's crew had called 37 pass interferences in the NFL, and the second one was like 19 or something like that. So they were almost double the pass interference calls, which that tells me they are not calling the game the same as other refs, which that's where I was going with. ESPN was even recommending that, well, if you get this guy as a ref crew, you want to throw more balls up because you're more likely to get a pass interference call. And now that's why I point, you're actually game planning based on a referee crew, and that should never happen in the NFL. The ref should call the game consistently.
well, he consistently makes bad calls, I guess. Anyway.
Well, he consistently makes calls he shouldn't make. That's
Yeah.
a real problem.
Well, you want consistency. There you go, Chad, I guess. I mean, the consistency, yep, wrong kind of consistency, but he's consistent. But anyway, speaking of conspiracy theories, though, Bruce Arians had some words to say after the Cardinals game against the Dolphins. I'm sure he didn't mean it this way, but it was just so amusing to hear it come out of his mouth like this. He said he stated essentially how convenient it was and how odd it was that every time the Cardinals had the football, the downpour would just go absolutely full out monsoon, and then the rain would stop as soon as Miami got the ball back. So I'm sure he didn't actually mean to say the Dolphins were cheating somehow, because I'm sure he knows that that's impossible. But it doesn't. It was just so amusing to me, Chad. It's like, this guy is actually trying to blame the fact that they lost on the weather. And then Michael Floyd gets called for the DUI right after that game. I'm thinking to myself, did losing to the Dolphins just break your guys' spirits? Did losing to Miami actually make you guys think this can't possibly be happening? These are still the Dolphins, right? It's like you blaming it on the weather. The weather. It's like, oh, it's so odd that the Dolphins got the dry weather and we got poured on every time. Maybe you should stop playing in a dome. That might help.
No, I think it wasn't the Dolphins specifically. That game really was the end of the Cardinals season. I mean, neither one of those teams could afford to lose the game to have any real good chance to playoffs. And, the Cardinals were already kind of on the outside, but it was kind of the nail in the coffin for the Cardinals season.
So Bruce Arians was salty.
And I think he's under a little bit of pressure right now. He's kind of a Chip Kelly type personality, where he just kind of thinks he knows his way's the best, and he doesn't have any interest in listening to anybody else's way. And those people that have those kind of personalities, I think, get a lot more pushback when they're not succeeding. And so Bruce Arians is probably getting a little bit, and he's had some health issues on top of it. And so I think there's probably maybe a little bit of growing maybe in the Cardinals management, that it might be time to look at a different coach. Even though the Cardinals had a great year last year, I think what Bruce Arians is feeling is some pressure. So he's basically pointing out to the media to try to slow down the let's get a new coach talk by saying, you know what, every time we had the ball, it was a monsoon. The Dolphins were cheating on special teams. And so he was making up excuses. I don't think he was intending to really attack the Dolphins, but he clearly was looking for some reasoning on why his team lost the football game, because it was the end of the year for his team, for the most part, for their playoff opportunities. So that's what I took it as.
Well, he did call out the Dolphins for allegedly calling out the snap count on the blocked field goal. So
yeah, I heard that, but whether that happened or not, I don't know. But the funny part I got was Izzo is such a fireball for the Dolphins anyway, but or Rizzo, it's not Izzo, I'm sorry, Rizzo, their special teams coach. Rizzy, gosh, I'm terrible today. Rizzy he has kind of a fireball temper to him. And so I did get a nice chuckle out of his response to when he said the Dolphins did an illegal snap count that made us screw up it. His response was, which one are you talking about? You guys missed 3 of them. And so he was kind of like poking a little more fun at him, because he knew which one I'm sure he was referring to, but it was like, we guys missed 3 times. So which missed kick are you talking about? But
I love I love the other response that he gave. Is like, other than changing the weather, we didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, they're making fun of him a little bit because he's again trying to point fingers at the Dolphins to take blame off of himself. But
I mean, he deserves it though. Like he said the weather. Yeah, the Dolphins installed a sprinkler system in the roof. That's what nobody reports.
yeah, exactly. That's it is what it is. So, you know what I would have liked to, despite the Dolphins winning that football game, I was a little disappointed that they still struggled a little bit with the weather because if any team should be ready to play in the rain, it should be the Dolphins. Maybe the Seahawks too. But did the Seahawks play in a dome? I can't remember.
I don't remember. I want to say yes. No, wait, no, because it was freezing in Seattle that one game, or was it Denver? Where did they play? God, I'm trying to remember. Where was it that they played? I think they're outside because you always see a bunch of Seahawks fans all dressed up in their parkas or whatever because it's freaking cold out there. So I think they're outside.
Right,
But the Cardinals, this is why I hated I've always hated that doggone practice bubble that Nick Saban made, because all it does is it protects you from the elements that you may wind up having to play in. So you are essentially taking away a very important aspect of preparation. And I was so happy to see that Adam Gase did not make the team run away when it started to rain outside. And because you and I both know that if it had been Joe Philbin's football team, everybody's going to hide in the bubble while it's raining. It's like, it's not even lightning. It's like, everybody go home because we're not coming back out because we don't want to get wet. It's like, are you serious? What a bunch of wussies. It's rain. You're not going to melt.
Oh, yeah, I agree completely.
So now the Cardinals get to know what it's like to be drenched. Oops.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough conditions, but yeah, like I said, that's a game I like to see him succeed in.
Yeah, I definitely get that. It hasn't rained that much since the season started, which is kind of odd considering that we really should be called the rain state, not the sunshine state, because it's usually raining most of the time, except for when the Dolphins are playing and practicing. I don't know. But in any case, I just found it so amusing that Bruce Arians would even go there because, like, you find it odd that the weather changed every time you had the football. Okay, and what are you suggesting? Because you had to know that if you say something like that, people are going to speculate like, oh, well, he's saying the Dolphins cheated somehow. Yes, Adam Gase has the power to control the weather. That's his secret weapon. He's Bill Belichick 2.0, all right. Yeah. And that's on the tailcoats or the coattails rather, of Steve Smith saying a week earlier that the Dolphins were whining because of the field conditions, and Steve Smith was misinformed because even though the Dolphins didn't like the field conditions, they also went out of their way to say that is no excuse for our performance. They said, no, we sucked. Like the field was bad, but we sucked. They play on the same field we did. So,
exactly. But to be
everybody's
honest,
taking shots at the Dolphins.
Yeah, and to be honest, if that happened, if players are yelling out snap counts, that is not. It's not. Well, you could call it cheating, but it's not cheating in the sense the Dolphins were doing something to win a game that was outside the boundaries of the game going on itself. That again,
it wasn't against the rules.
No, I mean it would be a penalty. I'm just differentiating. There's a difference between doing something that you should have got penalized on and doing something that's actually cheating. Cheating would be what the Giants are facing right now, where they were illegally using walkie-talkies or something like that. So again, to me, what Bruce Arians is talking about, it would be incompetence on the officiating crew because they should have called it. If that is indeed what was going on, it should have been a penalty. And so that's why I look at it. I'm like, well, if the refs didn't call it, does that mean it really was or wasn't happening? And so it's hard to say, what really happened in that situation. But I think you hit it exactly on the head there, Lewis. Bruce Arians was kind of salty with the loss. That was probably as close as you can say it.
Bruce Arians has pretty much blamed everybody but himself, it feels like. He blamed his players for not putting out effort. Now he blames the weather. He blames the snap count. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think he's lost his magic.
Well, I watching the game. Clearly, David Johnson's special right now. He's at the prime of his career. He's got a lot of abilities, and when I watched the football game, I was looking at it and questioning. I would have gotten the ball in that guy's hands a lot more. And the Cardinals did a lot of things, play calling wise, where I wasn't quite sure why they were doing what they were doing. But it is what it is. But I wasn't overly impressed with Bruce Arians' play calling. So if anybody deserved to What he should do to me as a leader of the team is he should have said, I need to do a better job calling plays and not say, no, the Dolphins were somehow affecting the weather and they were calling out snap counts. That's why we lost out.
Does Bruce Arians do the play calling for Arizona?
He's an offensive guy, and so I always put it on the coach first.
Oh,
If
okay.
if Bruce Arians is the head coach, it's on him to look at the game plan and control the flow of the game. So I'm not saying he necessarily say run this specific play, but you can go over to your offensive coordinator and say, I want you to use this kind of strategy in this game. And so to me, the Cardinals put Carson Palmer. If you know what it felt like the Dolphins last year a lot, what the Cardinals were doing, because the Cardinals line looked terrible and Miami was just blowing in there. And I actually, for one of the few times, felt kind of sorry for Carson Palmer because he's 37. He doesn't have a lot of talent at the wide receiver position. He has Fitzgerald, granted, but Fitzgerald's older and he's not a real fast wide receiver, and so they don't really have the wide receiver crew, and they have a terrible line, but yet they just kept dropping him back, expecting him to make plays, and he did pretty good, I thought, considering the beating he was taking. And so that felt a lot of like a Tannehill game last year where they just abandoned the run. We have Lamar Miller, who was looking pretty good, but let's just give it to him a few times and let's just throw the ball with our bad line and let our quarterback just get murdered. So that's what that felt like a lot for the Cardinals.
Well, what's done is done. Miami managed to win that game. Bruce Arians made a fool of himself, and now we're moving on to Jets week. And I don't know, Chad. I'm actually surprised we've actually gotten to get through as much as we have in such a short amount of time. I actually thought that this would take like the whole show and then some, but I guess we get to talk a little bit about the upcoming game itself. Jets are struggling, to say the least. They are not in a good position. People were speculating that Todd Bowles was going to be on the hot seat because they are falling apart after last year's pretty much miraculous season with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I'm like, I could have told you they wouldn't repeat that. I tried to tell you guys they wouldn't get that done the year they were getting it done because Ryan Fitzpatrick is not a good quarterback, and anybody who thought he was, I mean, honestly, bad quarterbacks have good years, folks. And it's pretty obvious when it's not hard to tell when a quarterback is good or bad. And I don't know if this is going to get people mad at me again because I know that everybody's on the Kirk Cousins train, but I really don't see anything about Cousins that screams great quarterback to me. I see a decent quarterback who's having a good year. Like, maybe I'm just wrong about this, Chad, and I think I've actually brought this up to you before, but Kirk Cousins screams to me like a Nick Foles or even a Brock Osweiler, whose circumstances facilitated an excellent year, but then once something else happens or something key goes wrong, or maybe just nothing because they just got lucky, the guy just falls apart at the seams. Kirk Cousins, the game that I saw was against the Green Bay Packers, I believe, and granted that's not a good example of a defense to face off against, but it seemed to me that everything that Kirk Cousins does on a highlight reel has something to do with him just heaving it as far as he can and just hoping the guy is out there. That doesn't scream good quarterback to me. That screams Matt Moore, last second, please catch the football because I'm going to die kind of quarterback.
Again, that's the league that I've been pointing out. And do I think Kirk Cousins? It looks like he's going to be a really good quarterback. He hasn't showed me anything that makes me think he's going to just take over and dominate the league. But Kirk Cousins has looked a lot better than other quarterbacks in the league. He's still pretty young. He has a lot of a game ahead of him, and he's playing decent. And so that's where I'm going back again. Is the people don't realize for somebody like maybe the Browns or the Jets or somebody that doesn't have a decent quarterback playing right now, if you're going off season now, granted the Jets might be looking at what they have in Bryce Petty right now, and maybe he'll be a decent quarterback. You just don't know. But if you're the Jets and you start a season and your options are Ryan Fitzpatrick, Jay Cutler, or Kirk Cousins, I'd take Kirk Cousins all day of the week, and that's
fine.
So I'm just pointing out, let's say Kirk Cousins is like the 19th best quarterback in the league, or he's the 20th best quarterback in the league. Everybody's wanting one of the top 10s, which everybody does, but it's much better to have a quarterback that, again, it's just decent versus one that's really bad, because it's nearly impossible in the NFL today to win if you don't have at least a decent quarterback. If your quarterback's just terrible, teams just stack the box, so you can't run the football, and you just take a beating. And the Browns are like the first hand of that right now. They just have not had a quarterback, and it just makes if you're playing the Browns, everybody knows just stack the box because they can't throw the football. And so Kirk Cousins is going to get paid, and he's going to get paid really well. And against if Ryan Tannehill, if the Dolphins just said, you know what, we're done, we're cutting Ryan Tannehill, Ryan Tannehill would have 5 teams lined up breaking their salary cap to try to get him because he's decent. You can bring him in, and you suddenly have a decent quarterback. And some teams desperately just want a decent quarterback right now. So that's Kirk Cousins is kind of in that range of, he's not a stud. He's probably limited a little bit on what he can do with the football. Like, he's not real fast at running, and he doesn't have this rocket of an arm. But you put all the intangibles and everything together, he doesn't play that bad. And again, that bad is a lot better than not that bad is a lot better than bad.
Well, I mean, but that's the thing, Chad. I agree with your assessment, but people are talking like you. I don't know if you've seen my Twitter feed, but every time I say something negative about Kirk Cousins, even remotely negative, like I'm not impressed, I get people jumping down my throat. Like I just said, Dan Marino was a mediocre quarterback. It's like, why do you guys like Kirk Cousins so much? I don't understand it. Nobody's saying well, I mean, the Tannehill defenders are, but it's like almost unanimous that Kirk Cousins is franchise quarterback material, except for the people who actually evaluate quarterbacks that I trust. Guys like Ian Wharton, for instance. He's not blown away by Kirk Cousins. He's had great results, yeah, but like, are people just like so blind to overall and individual talent that these guys are willing to believe that Kirk Cousins is a superstar? I can't believe it.
No, I don't know where. I feel everybody evaluates different. I don't think Kirk Cousins looks like a superstar quarterback to me, but like I said, I don't think he has an arm that's just unbelievable. You get the really amazing guys in the NFL, like Marino was, or Elway, or even Manning, and even Brady. I would say Brady has a rocket arm, but he's unbelievably accurate. And so those guys have both the intangibles and the talent. And when I look at Kirk Cousins, I look at a guy who's tough. He's got some good intangibles, and he's got an okay arm. That's where he's at. So he's probably never going to be anything better than a decent quarterback. I don't think 2 or 3 years from now we're going to be looking at Kirk Cousins and saying, wow, he is one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the league. I don't see him getting there, but he's good enough to make the playoffs and win football games with. And so if you're a team and you're trying to find a guy to get in there and you already have a pretty good structure, you add a Kirk Cousins in there and you can win football games. And again, that's what it's about, is winning football games. And people just forget you don't have the ability to go get Tom Brady. You don't have the ability to go get Aaron Rodgers, because you know what? Those teams keep those guys. They don't cut those guys. They don't trade those guys. And so if you don't have those guys, that's what your best option is to get Kirk Cousins right now, because at least he's decent. You can win with him. And so you gotta get what you can get. And Kirk Cousins is probably going to be the most coveted quarterback coming into this offseason, just because he's played decent. He's still got some upside to him, and he's young. And so if you're comparing him to Jay Cutler, Jay Cutler's intangibles aren't that good. He's had a lot of problems. Now he's getting into his 30s now, and so you don't know how much longer he has left physically. And I know he's had a really good arm, but Jay Cutler doesn't come off to me now as somebody that looks at as their franchise quarterback. He looks more to me like somebody who they'll take if they don't have anybody else and they want somebody they can put in there for a year or two. That's what Jay Cutler is. And same thing with Tony Romo. Tony Romo's probably done the best from a career of all the guys that are going to be available, and he's been a above average quarterback at times, but physically I can't imagine giving an enormous contract to Tony Romo and expecting him to stay healthy for, like, say 3 or 4 years and lead your football team. And so you put all those things together, and Kirk Cousins is probably going to get a pile of money, and he's probably going to be the most pursued quarterback coming into this offseason.
All right, I kind of went off on a tangent about Kirk Cousins and derailed the whole conversation. But now that we actually have gone here, I want to have some fun with this. You brought up Jay Cutler, so now this is all speculation and nothing is for sure. The only connection is that Gase and Cutler have, but should Miami look into a new backup next year, Chad, would you prefer to keep Moore again? Or would you, knowing the connection that Cutler and Gase have, would you prefer to bring in Cutler as the backup?
I would go Matt Moore all day right now. I will say this: Jay Cutler has a better arm than Matt Moore or Ryan Tannehill. Jay Cutler has an amazing arm,
Just arm
but
strength is
arm
what you mean.
strength, yeah, his arm strength and arm strength is more important than people give it credit for in the NFL because the guys are so quick, and if you have to throw a route that's like say a 10 to 15 yard out and on 3rd and 10, that's what the defense is giving you. If you don't have a quarterback that can do it, you've just shrunken your playbook down. And Jay Cutler can absolutely make those throws. But for one, Jay Cutler has everywhere he's been, he's had personality issues. He's been at odds, and this is year is no different. He absolutely was at odds with John Fox as the head coach, and he's had arguments with players, and he just is a personality trouble. And so that is the last thing in the world you want bringing in as your backup is a guy that's personality trouble. And so I don't see Jay Cutler being willing, from a pride standpoint, to be willing to go to a team to be their backup. He would much rather like go play for the Jets or something where he's going to be the starter. He's not going to come in and back up Ryan Tannehill anyway. And so for that reason alone, I wouldn't want him in here. Now, if Tannehill would have had an injury to his knee where it didn't look like he was going to be back, maybe until the middle of the season or something like that next year, then I can consider it Jay Cutler coming in because he's not a long-term quarterback option, but he might have been a good fit because Gase knew him and he has the talent to come in and play for a year or two for you. And
And
so,
Gase and Cutler likes him, so.
well, that's my point. Is so it could have made sense then, but now my thought is let's see how Matt Moore plays, and if Matt Moore plays really well over the next 3 games, then I'm probably really going to be on board with let's just bring him back because it's hard to get a good backup in this league that's got experience. But if Matt Moore doesn't play that well, to me the right option is they just need to spend the draft pick and do it, and maybe in the first like 2 to 3 rounds in this upcoming draft, they need to draft their backup quarterback.
Yeah, that was just for fun speculation. Let's. I'm gonna try and get us back on track to the Jets because honestly, I have been derailing the conversation all night long. So okay, Dolphins, Jets, round 2. Here we go. So Fitzpatrick is out, and Bryce Petty is in. I mean, now let me throw this scenario at you, Chad. And I don't know what your thoughts are going to be, and you're going to tell me now. But I personally, and I tweeted this out, I personally would have preferred if the Jets stuck with supposedly the guy who can get them the win. I would have preferred that they sent Fitzpatrick out there because I know what Fitzpatrick is going to do. I know exactly what he's going to do. He's going to make a few throws here and there, and then he's going to absolutely screw it up because that's just what he does. And then the Dolphins can make up for that, and somehow come away with the victory because Fitzpatrick literally threw it to them. I don't know what Bryce Petty is going to do. And that is actually the scariest part because once upon a time, the Buffalo Bills were without their starting quarterback. And here comes no-name Thad Lewis, who nobody knows and everybody's taking for granted. And by the way, was actually an awful quarterback when push comes to shove. But he beat the Dolphins twice. Not once, twice. I'm not sure. I think they actually threw in Thad Lewis specifically for that second game because they knew how well he did against Miami, specifically for that game. And so
Yeah.
I am stuck in a situation where I don't know what Bryce Petty is going to do. So it's kind of like a scary thing. It's like, I would rather have Ryan Fitzpatrick because I know what kind of bad he is going to be, but I don't know what Bryce Petty is going to do. I don't think he's good, but he's an unknown, and that actually scares me.
Yeah, and that's the NFL. So Bryce Petty most likely is superior talent-wise to Fitzpatrick, but in a game like this, they'll be changing it up. But again, in this game, I want to make him beat me. I think Forte's banged up or something, isn't he? I don't know if he's questionable or.
I haven't
or
seen the injury report.
He's the most dangerous player on that offense, in my opinion. Is Forte if he's healthy. He can do so many things. But if Bryce Petty is going to come in and light me up and I'll lose, well, so be it. The Jets they had their hidden gold gem on the roster. They didn't even know it, but. To me, you just got to make him beat you. So you got to stop the run. And I don't think Miami needs to blitz him heavily. I know the temptation is to say, oh, we've got a young quarterback, let's blitz him. The Dolphins, their personnel, they don't need to do it because they have Cameron Wake. Cameron Wake is so special at rushing the passer that I would rather not send a bunch of extra guys and maybe allow the Jets to catch Miami in a blitz and then score a quick touchdown.
Now,
I
and Sue in the middle with Nick Mangold out for the season at center.
Yeah, just let your guys up front control that game and make Bryce Petty beat you. So don't leave a lot of risky coverages out there and make him beat you. If Bryce Petty is going to throw, 13 or 14 passes on a drive and go all the way down the field and beat me, so be it. But I'm not going to give him some easy passes, and I want to make sure we can stop the run. So Bryce Petty has to beat me. That's to me the game plan for the defensive side of the football.
But would you, if you got to choose, who would you rather face, Fitzpatrick or Petty?
Fitzpatrick's, because Fitzpatrick's supposed to be the efficient game manager, and he was throwing interceptions like crazy. So he was anything but the efficient game manager. So I'd love to have Fitzpatrick in there, but you're not going to get him. But it's you're playing an inexperienced quarterback, and so inexperienced quarterback will make mistakes, and so. Miami needs to just focus on playing at a high intensity level and execute. And it's been a continuous process. The reason the Cardinals game ended up being as close as it did, that a lot of people didn't even really pay that close attention to, was the center, Anthony Steen, the Miami center. He did a
He's hurt.
He made an enormous mistake in that football game, and nobody said too much about it, but Miami had the ball on the Cardinals, I want to say 31-yard line, and with the weather conditions, Adam Gase chose to not go for a field goal there because it would have been like a 52-yard field goal or something like that. So rather than trying a 52-yard field goal, Adam Gase opted to go for it on 4th and 1 on the Cardinals' 31-yard line. That was midway into the fourth quarter now. And so if Miami gets a first down on that drive, one, the Cardinals wouldn't have even had the time to do what they did, or two, Miami would have probably pushed the ball into a lot closer field goal range and just won the game easily. But Steen actually had, as the center, who's the absolute most ridiculous guy on the team, to have a false start. Steen did. I don't know if you remember that play, but then Miami went ahead and punted the football because we had it at 4th and 6 there. And so that is the kind of stuff they've got to stop. We can't have these critical false starts and mental penalties that are execution at critical points in the game. And we've had that a lot the last 3 or 4 weeks that we've just been able to sneakily overcome. But you know what, we can't afford to do it anymore, and especially on the road. So that's what this game's going to be about. Is I just don't see Bryce Petty and the New York Jets offense right now with the injuries they have and what they're trying to do for next season. I just don't see them lighting the Dolphins up on the scoreboard. And so what you don't want to do is fumble the ball, make really dumb penalties, or throw interceptions. You don't want to beat yourself. And that's what this game is all about. Miami just needs to come out, play really hard, and play really smart. And I think they'll actually win the game fairly easily. But if they turn that, especially early, if they turn the ball over early, that's going to get the Jets all pumped up, and then we're going to be in for a dogfight because we'll be on the road, and they'll give them momentum. So that's the key to this game.
Well, here's the other thing I want to ask you about, and it's kind of half personal, half not, because maybe your personal experiences might be able to actually offer something here. True or false, Chad? It gets really freaking cold in Iowa in winter.
Oh, it's about 0 out right now and snowing like
crazy. My God.
So it does get very cold in Iowa.
Okay, so when do your kids play? I know Mason wants to play football. Does he play? Does he play when it's snowing outside? And if he does, is it bad?
He does, and I did the same thing growing up here, and you get all bundled up, and it's actually really fun because you can go out and dive around in the snow and play around with the football. Yeah,
but it's really hard to get a good grip on that ball because it's freaking freezing.
Oh yeah,
it's a rock.
Played, granted, I'm no professional athlete even close, but I've played at the high school level in cold games, and it's just different. Everything is different. I can tell you though, unless it's ridiculously cold, like maybe the Bears-Packer game coming. If you've got the temperature like into the 20s or 30s or more, it goes away pretty quickly because you're generating so much body heat with all the activity you're doing out there. That's the key to those games is just keep moving around and be active and stay warm. And it feels pretty good actually to play in 30 and 40-degree weather because you're so active and it's cooling you off. And so where it gets miserable is when you get down to those 0 or below and it's super windy, wind chill. That becomes a whole different beast in itself. But that's not something that looks like forecast wise that the Dolphins are going to need to worry about.
Well, it's supposedly the forecast is combined rain and snow, and if it's cold rain, it's like, ugh.
Well, if it's raining, yes, that makes the hanging on the football hard. But if it's not raining, the temperature looked like to me was going to be around 30s, which though makes sense because at 32, that's where you're getting the mix of snow and rain. But if the temperature is into the 30s range, I don't think the Dolphins are going to be in a situation where it's so cold they're not used to playing that cold of weather. So to me, I'm more worried about the Buffalo game the following week because that one could end up being 0, and so I think that'll be hard. Without a doubt, in my opinion, assuming the Patriots keep the first round bye, the Buffalo game is by far the hardest remaining game on our schedule.
Because I don't know anything about weather differences down here because it's like snow. What's snow? Like I know it's hard to hold onto the ball when it's wet. Like when it's wet, it's bad enough. But like I just picture the freezing rain and the snow, and I'm just like, how hard is it to hold onto the ball out there? It's like snow is a whole different animal.
Yeah, you got to just if you're playing in actual snow, how you play has to change up a little bit. Like if you're running the football, you shouldn't be using your normal stride because you're going to slip and fall. You want to use shorter steps and kind of pedal a little bit if the ground is slippery. And if you're catching the football, you want to go away from just catching with your hands and use your body more and stuff like that. And I don't know if you have players that played in the snow, maybe they're more used to that. But to me, it's more than anything, it's just psychological. I mean, just because a team's from Green Bay and you're from Miami doesn't mean they are innately better at playing in the snow than you are. You just have to go in and just say, look, it's just another thing you got to deal with, and you got to play your game and be smart. And so one thing I touched on this last week, though, one thing the Dolphins got to do is their training staff needs to get a pregame system together to get their footing figured out because it just seems like the players are falling. They were doing it in the Cardinals game. I know the field got wet, but man, get their cleats switched out and get them traction. I'm tired of seeing players fall.
That was the Brent Grimes syndrome, slip and fall right at the middle of a break. That's pretty bad.
You don't want to lose a critical game because you had the wrong cleats in. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that'd be bad. Okay, so we're getting close to calling this a wrap, but I want to actually get in a prediction before it's all over. So, Chad, prediction for tomorrow/tonight, depending on whenever you're listening to this. What's gonna happen?
Well, I think prime time is going to have the game be a little more energy to it than not because this is probably the Jets' last game on prime time. So I expect the Jets to come in a little more amped up than you might expect for a team that's out of it because they know they're going to be on national TV. And so that alone, I think Gase is going to be aware of that too. And so I expect Miami to come into this game and start off being kind of conservative. And so I think you're going to see Miami focus on trying to move the ball with Jay. I think you're going to see them do some short passes, utilize their tight ends, maybe get some balls out into Landry's hands, and be a little careful with Matt Moore until he starts to, get into the flow of the game. So I expect the game to come out to be fairly conservative to start. And so for that reason, I think the overall score is going to be a lower scoring game. And I think the Jets just have too many issues. I mean, I know it's going to be a rival game, and I know the Jets want to knock the Dolphins out of the playoffs. But if you look at who's out for the Jets right now, they're hurting pretty bad. And so I expect Adam Gase to figure out how to exploit that, and I expect them to figure out how to get some points on the board, and I expect our defense to fare pretty well against their offense right now. And so I'm going to predict Miami wins this game 21-14.
All right. Well, I'm gonna say that the Dolphins find a way to win this game, and I always have to make this assumption that it's going to be a low-scoring game because the way the Dolphins' offense and the defense have gone, and knowing that the Jets are struggling too, I feel like that this is going to be a very back and forth game, and not in the sense that they're going to be trading points. I think they're going to be trading turnovers and 3-and-outs. So one of these teams is going to have to step up and make something happen. So I'm going to call it another close game. This is how it's been for the pretty much the whole season, a close game. I'm going to say that Miami wins 17-14, and I'm actually going to go out on a limb and say that Andrew Franks has to win the game again, which is a scary thing to think about, but I mean, however you get it, because I don't know how much I trust Matt Moore, A, because of his style of game, B, the fact that he doesn't seem to have a preference in the playbook. Like, I don't know if he's trying to make himself look better because it's like, I can do anything. It's like, yeah, you can do anything, but you still have a preference, don't you? Or because if he doesn't, then that tells me he just doesn't care. He's just going to throw the ball no matter what the play is. And C.
Oh, go ahead, Lewis.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to interject right with where you're at there. With this game, for all you fantasy people, if you're having your fantasy playoff game, I would seriously consider starting Devontae Parker. He's healthy again. He's feeling better from his back injury. And I'm telling you right now, Matt Moore is going to take some big shots down the field to Devontae Parker. It's going to happen. So it wouldn't shock me at all if this is one of those games where Devontae Parker throws up 100 to 150 yards and a touchdown. So that's my fantasy insider advice, is seriously consider starting Devontae Parker this week.
Well, if he does that and it works, Chad, then the Dolphins are going to win way more than by 3 points, because if that's how it's going to go, then that would be absolutely amazing. Although personally, this is just my thoughts since I'm not really a fantasy guy, but this is just my opinion. If I'm going to pick somebody to use fantasy points on deep shots, I would say Kenny Stills more than Parker, because Parker has proven that he's good at jumping, but he's not good at holding onto the football once he's actually got it like in his hands. And he's also not good at being in bounds. So there's that. And B, the other thing is that Darrelle Revis is going to have to cover somebody, and they're not going to bench this guy because he's freaking Darrelle Revis. And Revis has struggled mightily this year, and he's always struggled, even when he was really good, with raw speed. That's Kenny Stills' bag. So if Revis has to cover somebody, and unless he's shadowing Landry, I don't see why he wouldn't take the deep shots to Stills, because I don't think there's anybody in the secondary right now for the Jets who can just – I don't know if there's anybody who can actually beat Stills in a foot race.
Oh, no, I agree. Stills just it's a harder – either way, I think Matt Moore has no problem with taking shots on the field.
Yeah, I think that's who you need to start in fantasy. You just start Matt Moore.
Start Matt.
It's like roll the dice, start Matt Moore, see what happens.
That would be a dice roll. There's no doubt about that.
All right, so he's either going to get you your playoff win in fantasy, or he's going to absolutely shut you down. Like, how much of a gambler are you?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, I guess we'll go ahead and call it a night. Any last-minute thoughts you want to get out there, Chad?
No, that's it. Go Dolphins. Let's hope we keep the team rolling.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening. I know it was a little bit scattered, but I guess that's kind of how all the best shows happen. It's like you can have a plan, but if you don't let it just kind of flow, then it comes off as too scripted. We just kind of go all over the place. You let me know if that's good or bad. Like, tweet at me and say, hey, this show was good because this, or hey, you need to work on organizing and stop rambling so much, Lewis. It's like, okay, well, I'll work on that. So, anyway, thank you all so much for listening. We'll be back next week for some more talk, and we'll see you all next week for another episode of the PhinManiacs.com podcast.